Welcome to the Trial Time Podcast. We have a special guest, possible future co-host for special occasions when someone's in court. My co-host Jim Parkman is in court today, so he couldn't be here, but we've got Sam Amin here today, attorney from San Francisco and social media influencer. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and definitely a pleasure to co-host if the opportunity arises at some point in the future. I was gonna tell you, so my legal name is Haitham. It's Haitham Amin, right? So I tell folks it's Sam, and they always ask, well, how'd you get Sam from Haitham? How did that jive? And I always start with this anecdote. I have this story from middle school, and I'll share it with your viewers. I was sitting in science class. I think it was seventh or eighth grade. I can't remember. But my science teacher comes up to me and says, "Hey, I can't pronounce your name." And I tell him, "Well, it's Haitham. You know, you just say hi, like Haitham." And he's like, "Haitham. Okay, well, what if I just, it sounds like it just like hi Sam. Like, what if I just call you Sam?" I was like, "Oh, never thought of that one before." So ever since middle school, I've been telling folks, if you can't say my legal name, just call me Sam. And here we are. Here we are 30 or whatever, 20 plus years later.
Yeah, well, Jim and I were based out of Alabama. We do trial work. We've tried cases all over the country. Well, Jim's tried them all over the country. I've handled cases mainly Alabama, Georgia area. I've got one case pending in New Mexico right now. But tell our viewers about your practice. You're based out of San Francisco area. What kind of practice do you have? How have you been able to grow your firm?
Yes, yes. So I started actually at the public defender's office, couple public defender offices, and they're approximately 30 minutes or so from away from San Francisco. And as you're well aware, I mean, you're a vet. You know the system in the public defender world. You get thrown into an open sea, and you learn how to swim with anywhere between 150 to 300 cases. And you're just juggling the ball and constantly in trial prep, and it was tremendous experience. I now that I reflect on it, it was very, very helpful for my now career, because I went private in 2013, and first when I went private, I was very scared because you're out there, you don't know how to get business. I don't have any lawyers in the family. It's not like I can reach out to my dad or my uncle and say, "Hey, how do you do it?"
I feel like I'm talking to myself now. You got the same experience.
Yeah, right, exactly. So and we're legally trained, but we're not business trained, right? Especially like in a boutique law firm world, or even small firm, any type of firm. You're just not trained how to open up an office and have the processes, and the system in there to generate clients and leads. So when I started in 2013, I remember talking to other private attorneys, but it wasn't very helpful either, because they were in the same boat as me.
Yeah.
And all the big guys, the mentors, the so-called mentors, were in a way hiding the ball. And you could probably understand this very well. People don't necessarily want to give you the secret sauce.
There's only so much of that pie, man. They don't want to cut you a big slice.
Exactly right. So I learned quickly that you've got to figure out what works for you, because you cannot copy someone else's secrets or business model, etc. So I started doing a lot of online advertisement, specifically Google, and posting on Facebook, just giving legal advice. And back then, talking about 2013, 2014, video, TikTok videos, 30-second videos was not a thing.
Yeah.
We had memes, right? Which you put out a meme.
I remember memes, man.
And man, it sounds like we're aging ourselves here. Remember memes? So I remember we would put out, I would put out tips, and say, hey, well, how to beat a traffic ticket. And so I started garnishing a lot of interest when it came to traffic. And San Francisco, for whatever reason, just like any other major city, was relentless when it came to infractions and traffic violations. And by relentless, I mean if you ran a yellow light and it just turned red before you clear the intersection, they will pull you over. They'll give you a ticket. I mean, they were giving tickets left and right. So business, there was definitely a need for that, and I found that my business thrived initially when I started doing traffic tickets. And a lot of people say, well, you can't survive off a couple of tickets here and there. And I tell them, you'd be surprised, because when I put up ads on online and I start talking about traffic practice and all of that, I got a lot of business. I mean, I would walk in on average every week anywhere between 10 to 20 cases, and that was
That's volume right there.
volume. And it was good money. I didn't have big overhead. I had a virtual office at Regis. I'm sure you know what Regis is.
Yeah.
I didn't have, staff. I didn't have a fancy car. I was just basically trying to survive. So it was good money. And I would walk in there every week with good volume. And then eventually one of the bigger guys came in there and took over the business, and it stopped making sense for me to pick up these cases. So I had to reinvent myself. That's when, I started doing a lot of online advertisements, specifically with Google PPC. And that took a lot of effort and money. And after a year, I realized I was working for Google. Wasn't making any money. I was just barely surviving. I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. Then I started dabbling with social media, specifically Instagram, before TikTok was hot.
Let's talk about your Instagram real quick. How many followers do you have? I'm seeing 231,000.
Yeah, they fluctuate. One day I wake up and I lose followers. The next day I put up a nice video and it gets me a nice chunk of followers. And I don't know, somewhere here or there, maybe people just hate seeing my face and they just say, "I'm had enough of this guy."
And that's a substantial amount of followers, though. We had Riddick Bowe, former two-time world heavyweight boxing champ, on recently, and he doesn't have the social media Instagram following you yet.
I have to be honest with you. I have to attribute a lot of the followers that I have from my TikTok account, because I'm very blessed to have 1 million followers on TikTok, and that kind of spilled over into Instagram, other social media outlets like YouTube, etc. But now what I do is I have a social media team that's actually based out in LA. Shout out Sebastian Pardes. He's my good friend and social media manager. I fly out of LA once a month. Sometimes he comes my way, and we shoot anywhere between, I don't know, 30 to 40 skits. And we get into the scenes. It's actually a lot of fun, because you're doing things that are organic, in the sense I don't have to pretend to be someone that I'm not. By definition, I like to laugh, and I like to. I'm sort of a jokester, it's just in my personality. So when I'm in front of the camera and I do things that are jive in with who I am as a person, it comes out organic, right? I don't try to be someone that, if I'm looking at someone else's video, I'm like, I really love this content, but I can't put out the same style because it's not who I am. People can kind of see that, and it suffers.
That's a lot like even being a trial attorney, going to courtroom. I'm sure you learned that in the public defender's office. You may have a guy that's got a great style and it's amazing, but it may not work for you because it's not you. That's one thing I learned. I was trying to emulate people, but whether it's a TikTok video, Instagram video, even a commercial or a trial, you gotta be yourself.
Absolutely. And you probably know this better than anyone. When you go in there and you are not yourself and you're not being your authentic self, the jury will smell that from a mile away.
Yeah, because people can tell.
People could tell. People could tell, especially folks that are sitting in the jury. They tend to be upstanding citizens that are out there in the workforce, taxpayers, so they can smell BS. So and that's the thing. If you're not being your genuine self, it spells not just in your career, it spells also in your business model. People can't trust you; they're not going to hire
you. That's correct. That's a true statement. On this show, we usually talk about trials and tribulations people face outside. We've had celebrity guests on here. but we wanted to get lawyers on it. We want to talk about some of those for you as well, and how you got to be as successful as you are. But there's something I've been wanting to do once we get an attorney on. And I think it's great. It can be a private practice story, but with you being in the public defender's office starting out, I'm sure you've got some great ones. Would you mind sharing a war story with us from the
Oh
courtroom?
yeah, absolutely. I've got a lot of good stories. A war story, as in a fight between myself and a district attorney, or a funny story, as in like a case where a client comes in and they do something totally unexpected.
I'll take either one.
Let's start with the funny one because that one resonated very well with me, and I remember it vividly. So, I had this case at the public defender's office, Marin County specifically,
Yeah.
and it was, and I don't know if you do any fishing or not, but I learned a lot.
Yeah, love
Okay,
fishing.
I didn't know, so I didn't know you could go clamming. You can actually go like
I haven't been clamming, but I've heard of clamming.
all right. So that was me back in I don't know, 2012 or so, and I was I didn't know what the hell clamming was. I knew of fishing. I know the uh, fish and game code in California. There's part of it that's punishable by by a crime and a fee and a fine. But I didn't realize people actually enforce these things. So, and we live on the Bay Area. We're surrounded by water, Marin County is about 25 minutes north of San Francisco. And so I walk in there, and it's an arraignment calendar that I was handling that day. And for folks that don't know what an arraignment is, it's a first court date where you're presented with the charges and you say guilty, not guilty, or a lot of people just say not guilty and continue the case further. So I come in there and I'm assigned this case, and this gentleman, my client, he has two buckets, and he has his family members each also holding different kind of buckets. Initially, us, being in the public defender arena, we don't ask why you're holding buckets because we understand folks could be, transient, they could be unhoused. So, you don't want to be, insensitive. So you don't ask why do you have your belongings with you, right? You just sort of play it off. But it got really interesting because I realized some of them were dripping water. Now, again, I didn't ask any questions because I just didn't think it was necessary as to why we were, why we were here. And I explained to them the charges. I had a translator because they didn't speak English, and I told them, we'd probably be able to resolve this. If there is a true violation for just a fine, I don't think you have to worry about actual misdemeanor conviction. But they were so adamant. They were so adamant that they actually didn't. They wanted to fight the case, and I actually like that because I figured, I've never tried, nor have I ever litigated the case involving fishing gaming violations. So I was like, hey, let's do it. I'm game. Let's go. So we go in there, and they didn't want to waste time. They wanted to do a speedy trial, and that was their right. So we go in there, and I thought we agreed that we're going to set the case for trial. We're going to proceed. Next thing I know, they're opening up the buckets, and they're pulling out what I thought were clams, but mussels.
Yeah.
And they were saying that they weren't clamming. These are mussels, and I guess they were using the meat to bait fish or bait some sort of or lobster or something, if I remember correctly. And I'm sitting there. I mean, the water is dripping everywhere. They're waving the mussels to the judge. The judge is like going, "Hey, what the hell is going on here?"
Got a loophole. It's not a clam. It's a mussel.
Right? Yeah. And then everyone starts laughing. Everyone starts dying, and I'm sitting there like, "What the hell is going on?" And I'm telling him to, drop the mussel, just drop the mussel. This is not trial. We're just saying not guilty. And the translator is going crazy translating. So the judge asked us to approach. Obviously, we go to in his. He was laughing hysterically. We're in chambers. Everyone's laughing, and he tells the DA, "You've got to dismiss this case. We're not gonna have a trial on clams and mussels and waste taxpayers' money." But that was that was probably the highlight of my career, where I had a judge basically um, laughing his way to a dismissal. I've never had that before.
You know, I know some judges that probably would have wanted to have that trial anyway, just because they would have thought, oh, this is gonna be a funny story. I want to hear
Right,
this.
right. I think so. Yeah. I mean, that was my first rationale. It's either that or you're gonna piss off the jury.
Yeah.
Is there gonna be are we really here wasting our time because someone, didn't know the difference between muscle and a clam? And but that was, yeah, that was one of my favorite stories that I like to tell. But obviously, I have many other stories where DAs try to be dirty, and a lot of times pull fast ones, and that is unfortunate in our legal system.
Yeah.
But a lot of folks don't understand that we are the only barrier in court. And I always tell my clients this: you're walking in there, uh, the judge hates you, the bailiff hates you, the DA hates you, the staff probably hates you. I'm the only one that's standing between them and you.
And they,
Um,
then do you end it with, and they like me?
well, I mean, like you, right? Exactly right. And it's a lot of times too. It's I have the story where, and I'll tell you real quick if you have time for the
Yeah.
story. I have the story where, unfortunately, a court staff, you could tell she didn't like me because what I've heard is because she thinks that I represent, really bad people. And my answer to people that think like that is always, everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. So if we all agree on that, how are you able to pass judgment before they're actually
Yeah.
convicted? And if you're in that predicament, you wouldn't want people passing judgment on you.
Yeah.
So she did. I mean, she didn't like me for a very long time, and we're in court all the time. We don't pick fights. We try to be neutral because you're there. You can't really burn bridges, right? But this particular time, I was on the record, and I had picked a date before we go on the record, and the judge asked me who gave you that date, and I mentioned the court staff by name, and she stopped. She just got up. She stood up, and she's like, "This is this for you. You have to call me Mrs. Blah 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 blah. You can't call me by my first name." And that was like on an open court, and everyone was just very uncomfortable. And the judge looked at me, and she felt really embarrassed for me and really, really upset. And that was just one experience that I had that I recall where because of I carry my client's case on my back and I litigate on his behalf, or his voice in the courtroom, you get to inherit some of that hatred and dislike.
Yeah.
Some people are better at it than others. Others obviously she shouldn't be in that profession if she is going to think of defense attorneys in such a negative light. But a lot of folks don't have it in them to differentiate and kind of hold it and not pass judgment in the legal system, which is kind of mind-boggling. It makes you wonder if these are the folks that are in the legal system. Imagine random people on the street that are potentially your jury pool.
I would agree with that. And just to share a very short story, I tried a murder case one time. And after the trial's over, I made a comment to one of the court reporters, and I just said, the jury won't be out long on that one. And she's like, "Oh, you think they're going to convict him that quick?" And I'm just like, "Have you been paying attention to this trial? They're going to find him not guilty. There's like no evidence against this guy." But sometimes you'll even have people that have been in the court system so long they're preconceiving everyone's guilty, everything else, and that jury was out 30 minutes and found the guy not guilty. So
here's a virtual pound for you, my brother.
But it happens, and that's the thing. Like I started off as a prosecutor for my first 2 years, and now still do trial work, whether personal injury, some business litigation, criminal defense. One of the big things we got to focus on in the legal field is like keeping it civil, the civility.
Right.
But I'll say this too, because you and I are a little closer in age. Jim, my partner, 72. I always hear the older attorneys say,
nice.
and they always say it's there's no civility in the law anymore. I'm like, most of the toughest guys that are being just jerks are all you old guys.
There we go. Exactly. The OGs, right?
Like it's not civil anymore. It's like,
Yeah,
hold on, I'm gonna pull a fast one on this young
yeah,
kid.
that is very true. It's always the older generation that's very aggressive for no
Yeah,
reason at all.
just come
Like,
in.
you mentioned PI, personal injury, and
Yes.
in my practice, I have other attorneys that do family law and personal injury. I got to tell you, I do personal injury, and I have to say it's much less hectic and aggressive. Even though you deal with
It is.
adjusters and insurance attorneys, but it's just not as uh, aging of a process.
By and large, I will agree with you on that. Every now and again, you run into that brick wall. Someone's going to be a brick wall on one side, and it's just like, okay, we're just going to fight over every motion, every discovery issue.
Right,
We're going to be going to the court on motions to compel because someone's going to say something's insufficient. You're like, no, I gave it to you.
right,
That's all there is. And then you get all these other hearings, and it's a trial, but it does seem like a lot of times in the criminal system, it's just more common that, hey, if I get 10 criminal cases, 4 or 5 of them are going to be a jury trial.
right,
If I get 30 personal injury cases, one might be a jury trial.
right. And you're not going to trial for 3 years.
Yeah, that's also true.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's just the civil the courthouses here in the Bay Area, I'm sure all over the country,
yeah.
are so impacted that they're setting out trials unless you meet an exception for being an old of age, you're not getting fast tracked. You're gonna sit there in the back of the line.
And especially with COVID delay, everything got pushed back, and then criminal gets priority. So but
Right?
that's because people, which justice delays, justice denied, whether civil or criminal. But with criminal, it does carry that extra weight.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a case from 2020 that's still active. It's a criminal case, and we've gone through probably 8 different DAs, discovery issues. I finally said it. I had a diversion granted. It was a court diversion that was thankfully granted. So now I'm just waiting for it to be completely dismissed, hopefully in the next couple months.
What's
Yeah, it's
what's the
terrible.
speedy trial out there?
For what? I'm sorry. What was the question?
What's your time limit on a speedy trial out there?
45 days.
Oh, like you don't even want to come to Alabama, man. Here, there's some case law that says 3 years is not a speedy trial delay.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, the COVID rules were different.
Yeah.
You're talking about COVID rules?
Well, that's not even COVID. That's pre-COVID.
Oh, okay. So that was case. Okay, okay, got it,
That
got
was
it.
case law
Yeah.
pre-COVID. Florida is 180 days. I'm licensed in Georgia, and I can't think of what it is off the top of my head right now. But
I'm sure
Alabama's
we
got
can
some.
Google
Yeah,
it.
I could.
Let's see if we can Google it.
Google lawyer. Um, I tell people not to do that all the time, but it actually is sometimes.
Sometimes necessary.
Uh, uh,
Sometimes.
a quick thing I see is once it's speedy trials filed, must be filed. Court. The case must be tried within the current term of court. But I mean, even that in and of
Whatever that
itself
is. Yeah,
could be a little vague because some smaller counties, you're in a rural area, they may have court twice a year.
that's
If you're
true.
in a metropolitan area, it could be twice a month.
Jesus, you really are in the thick of it.
Mhm.
The rural world is something else.
Yeah. And we're not in that bad of a location where I'm at, but I have tried cases in rural counties, and it's different. There's sometimes I'd rather be in a rural county, and sometimes I'd rather be in the city. I don't know if you've ever experienced what we call home cooking.
And I love me home cooking, soul food. I love it all,
Oh, no,
man.
no, I'm not talking about that home cooking.
Oh, you're talking about the other home cooking.
I'm talking about home cooking in the legal room where you're out of town and they
Oh, out of towner. We call that an out of towner treatment. I get the
uh,
out of towner when I go out of county. So I know exactly what you're saying.
down in the South we say, oh, he just got home cooked, and they gave him that out of town treatment.
Especially if the judge can't say your name.
Every objection you say, objection, overrule. The local boy, objection, sustained.
That is very,
Judge,
very.
judge asked the witness their name, sustained.
That is a very, very true, man. That is so true. I experience that whenever I go out of San Francisco Bay Area. I
Yeah.
experience that firsthand, so I know exactly what you're saying.
It seems to me like it's less likely to happen in a bigger city versus a small town, but I think it can happen anywhere.
Well, I think it's a familiarity, right? So if you're walking into courtroom 3 times a week, judges sort of know you by face at minimum. They're much more comfortable, doing certain things for you out of respect for the decorum, you
Yeah.
know. Whereas if you're coming there once, like you said, once or twice a year, they can barely remember you. They probably figure out I'm probably not going to see this person anytime soon, so hell with him.
Yeah.
Um, but that's that takes us into a whole nother discussion when it comes into appeal work, post judgment work, and all of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes
'Cause,
you're,
yeah,
you're forced.
you never seen anybody get cooked by the appeals court, that's for sure. No out of towner treatment there.
Not a ton of treatment there because everyone is pretty much an out of towner, right?
Yeah.
Unless you have a private practice,
Yeah.
used to be an ex judge or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Wow. I tell people all the time, I say, hey, sometimes you need an out of town attorney, and sometimes it's better to have someone local. Um, each case is a little different.
and
And
I get calls sometimes surprisingly, and you say, "Hey, I'm out of your jurisdiction." I tell them, "Listen, it's expensive to bring me out there. Why don't you hire someone local?" They'll say, "I don't trust any of the attorneys here," as an example, because they're all good old boys club where everyone knows everybody, and they're not gonna go the extra mile for me because they play golf with the DA or whatever. And I tell them, maybe it is a legitimate concern, but it makes you wonder, right? If it's just a small town, rural California or wherever, and everyone knows everybody, is that? I thought that would be a good thing, but I guess I could also see how it's a bad thing because sometimes you don't want to ruin relationships over certain cases.
yeah, that's
Sad.
yeah, that's a good point. I know I'm thinking out loud now to myself. Heck, pro hoc vice admitted into a few states, as some people will say pro hoc vice. But
Vici. I used to say Vici. I guess I was saying it wrong.
I always say pro hoc vice.
Okay.
I read English, not Latin.
Yeah, yeah, right. I know. Yeah.
But and it's interesting because it depends on what jurisdiction you're going into, how easy it is to do it, and some require the local judge to sign off. Some it's just filing a form with the state bar. But even the treatment you get as an out of towner or an out of stater.
And I've always been curious about because I've never been to Alabama, or probably the only place in the South that I went to is Florida. I don't know if Florida Atlanta is considered the South. I think it is, right?
Yeah.
I love them both, and I've always wondered being in because you've got all these sister states around you.
Mm-hmm.
Is it easy to travel to and from the courthouses, or do you actually can you actually drive there, or do you actually have to fly?
Usually I just drive everywhere. I've had cases pending in Atlanta because I'm also licensed in Georgia. It's about a 3 hour drive for me. We got an office in Dothan, Alabama, and one in Birmingham. I run the Dothan office, so but I go up to Birmingham once a week or once every other week. So
And you're probably do you have a preference? I'll think Alabama, right? Because you probably know everybody there.
I mean, honestly, it depends on what kind of case it is too, because some of the laws are so different. It's a little bit easier dealing with people in Alabama because I am here more, but I've got a lot of friends over in Georgia. And also, depending on the case law, Alabama for personal injury is one of the last contributory negligence states around.
Oh, really?
Georgia's comparative. So, for a personal injury guy, you tell me which one you'd rather be in.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And this is probably I mean, has to be challenging for you because, I deal with California law and federal court. If I have federal cases, that's the extent of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't imagine knowing different case laws for other jurisdictions and try to keep that, in my mind. I mean, it sounds like you're continuously studying to keep up with, all these different jurisdictions.
I'll tell you what I tell young lawyers because we just hired a couple of associates. I left a firm a little over a year ago. I took one paralegal with me. I brought Jim in later because he had a falling out with his old firm. He's a good friend. We got together. but within under 2 years, I think we've grown to, we got 7 people on staff now. So we've kind of really exploded, but we've got a new associate. And I was telling her, I said, look, there's general practice attorneys out there. There's people that specialize in one area of law. I honestly think you can be good at about 2 areas, and that's it. Otherwise, you start getting a mile wide and an inch deep. I'm licensed in 2 states, and even that 2 areas I practice in, primarily personal injury and criminal defense. If I start getting into another state or anything, it's you start getting with the niches and everything. An attorney told me there's riches in niches.
It's tough. It's tough. I couldn't imagine. And I know exactly what you're saying, because initially when I started out, I was hoping to just stick to one area of the law and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
As you're well aware, starting out, it's hard to do that because you don't know how to get clients, let alone keep the lights on. So auto accidents, personal injury is the first thing everyone thinks about. And then you supplement that with what you already know, which is criminal defense or family law. And when things do tend to pick up, the older you get, at least for myself, the more desire you have that you want to just focus on one area, because you just don't have the mental bandwidth to even take on as much as you used to when you first started out, and you're hungry, and you want to be out there and get all the business you can, and drive a nice car or whatever, wear nice clothes. So I know exactly what you're saying, precisely.
Well, like I said, we'd love to have you back on. Looking for a guest co-host next time Jim's in court, or if I'm in court. So if you'd like to do it, love to have you.
So you usually have it on Thursdays.
Yeah, do Thursdays, and sometimes we'll do Wednesday depending on court. But I want to ask you to do one message as well. We always ask someone else to do, every guest. If you could give a message to everyone watching, someone could be going through a similar trial or tribulation like you've gone through, starting up, growing a practice, getting successful, branding their business via social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. If there's a message you could give them as you went through those trials of growing it and to stay positive, what would you tell them?
My message to everyone, whether or not you're in the legal world, I don't care what space you're in, learn how to fail with a smile. Because if you're not failing, you're not learning. And if you're not learning, you're never going to improve. If you fail, those failures are lessons. They're not free, but they're lessons, and you learn from those lessons. And eventually you will get it right. So continue to fail. I fail every single day because I try new things every single day. And I do it with a smile. If I can do it, anyone can.
Thanks, Sam. Love to have you again.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and I would love to co-host perhaps sometime in the future. We'll talk off record.